Live session hosted by FAB, your insurance broker and moving to France expert. FAB is like your immigration GP. We're here to answer all your questions. Visas, residency, healthcare, driving, taxes, properties, and much more. We navigate the complexities of France to help you embrace the French lifestyle you've always imagined. Although we are experts in the immigration industry and have been working in this space since 2015, none of what we say should be considered legal or financial advice. It is also worth noting that the immigration industry is an ever-evolving field, so things that are relevant today might be outdated or inaccurate when you actually move to France. FAB's main source of revenue is insurance through our brand, FAB French Insurance. Our main goal is to ultimately help you move to France, as we only sell insurance to clients applying for a visa, a residency permit, or those with a French address. During the session, you can ask any questions you want. However, we will not answer long questions to keep the pace fast. We also won't be able to address questions related to personal or very specific issues, but rest assured, we can get in touch after the session to either advise or refer you to one of our trusted partners. And now it's time to get this event started. Thank you for joining us today. We hope you find our answers valuable. Our greatest reward would be to be a part of your journey to moving to France. And hopefully, it starts with this session today. We will pause briefly to allow all registrants to join. The session will begin shortly.
Hello, everyone. So we are live. Good morning for those in the US, maybe good afternoon. And good evening-ish for those who are watching this from Europe or other parts of the world. I'll be your host this evening or morning. Then I'm Fabien from FAB Expat and FAB French Insurance. And I have the pleasure, so I'll talk from the French perspective. I have the pleasure this evening to be joined by Ben Ashcroft and Tommy Sikes, who are going to be panelists this evening. So Ben and Tommy, if you don't mind getting back on and so that the audience can see you.
Hi,
Ben.
everyone.
And hi, Tommy.
Bonjour. Bonjour, Fab.
Bonjour. We're super lucky to have Tommy here because his modem died yesterday and Amazon was fast enough so that he could be with us now. Well, we'll do a brief introduction of the speakers. So, on to you, Tommy. Who are you?
I am Tommy Sikes. I am a certified financial planner, still located in the United States. I'm in North Carolina, and I run the website and newsletter Retire to Europe. So if you go to retiretoeurope.com, you can join us. It's a weekly newsletter where we talk about taxes, healthcare, property, other topics for Americans interested in retirement in France, but also Italy. But obviously, we'll talk about France today, which is my personal favorite. I love Italy, but France is France stole my heart when I was younger.
Well, it's funny because also we happen to have Ben Ashcroft dining with us this evening. And Ben, I just learned that he also has Italian origins. So maybe, Ben, you can also introduce yourself and what you do.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, my name's Ben Ashcroft Dinning. I'm Australian originally, but as Fabien mentioned, I am half Italian and have moved to France about 5 years ago. I love both countries equally. It's really hard for me to choose a favorite. So I'm an Australian buyer's agent based here in France, and I specialize in helping people who don't live here yet, like Americans, Australians, British, but who wish to buy a property in France and who often don't speak the language. So my team and I assist you through the entire process, from the search to visiting to providing you with a professional team to help you execute a successful and smooth purchase in France, which is, it's complicated, and it's good to have professional help in such a big, important process.
Yeah, yeah, and with all France being so bureaucratic as well, it's like there's a lot of pitfalls that you can, I wouldn't say easily avoid, but yeah.
Yeah, no, you just have to know your way around the property world here. It's very different than my home country, Australia, different from the US, that I learned from all my clients of how things work over there. And so, I mean, it's not the time for making costly mistakes.
No, well, definitely not.
Yeah.
So thank you everyone for joining this evening, or again this morning, depending on where you are. I've seen some questions already. So this is going to be recorded. We're going to publish this on the replay on our FAB Expat YouTube channel. Also, we're going to send a follow-up email just in case. We're going to try to address as many questions live as we can. Just in case you still have some questions after this event, we're going to send a follow-up email to all of you guys who registered to the event, so that you'll have Tommy's and Ben's contact details and way to reach out. So that includes confirming their website and stuff like this. So you're going to have ways to reach out after the event. That being said, we'll start with a few set of questions that we got also prior to this event. So I'll start with you, Tommy. I've known you for a few years, I think now. So you've been finding gems. So we'll talk about France indeed. You've been finding gems and sharing that on YouTube for a while. So from what you've seen so far, what makes the French property market unique, compared to, other European countries?
Well, I will say from a lot of people I talk to, their expectation with France is that it is not that affordable. And I think this comes because Paris in particular is very expensive. So I think that colors people's perception for all of France. But as soon as you get outside, actually even like the outskirts of Paris, but certainly when you get out into the more rural areas, smaller cities, smaller towns, the real estate prices can be very affordable, especially compared to the United States, which over the last years, if everybody knows, is just outrageous. So yeah, if for an American, for example, who owns a house in the United States, maybe it's paid off, the mortgage is paid off, and they're thinking about retirement, and they think, well, I could sell this house, and get some money, but then maybe I'm going to move to a condo in Florida or Arizona or somewhere like that. And a lot of times those condos or those areas might be almost as expensive. And thinking about something like France, I mentioned Italy too, but people would be, I think, surprised to know that they could sell their property in the United States, buy a property outright in France if they wanted to, and have a good chunk of money left over to potentially live on for a few years at least.
Oh yes, that definitely is a trend that I'm seeing with a lot of US clients indeed. Actually also British clients, and pretty much anyone that's not from France or Europe, because very often there's quite some leftovers once they sold their properties and bought a French one, especially if it's like you were saying it doesn't have to be super rural, but if it's not in a very busy city like, obviously Paris or Nice, which are quite expensive. But if you steer clear from those cities, very quickly the prices plummet, and indeed there's quite a few gems. And actually, speaking about gems, do you have a few tips and tricks on how you find those gems, on the French market?
I, usually I will. Well, there are a couple of resources I use. One thing, and maybe this is just me, but one thing I love about France, and again, I think retirees would consider this, is the transportation, the train network. And so I will always have like, there's basically a map that the SNCF publishes, and it shows every train route in the entire country of France, down to like the small stations. And you can basically use this as a blueprint to find, smaller towns and cities that have a train station. Maybe they're along a, more popular train route, or close to a bigger city. And those are the places that I would start looking. And this can be really all over the country, but particularly in the south west. So, south of Bordeaux and a little to the east of Bordeaux. So that would be like the Dordogne, Lot and Garonne.
Oh, you know your French departments.
Tarn and Garonne, the Land. So that area in south west France is, I think, still underrated. A lot of people think about the Côte d'Azur, the southeast corner of France, which of course is beautiful but expensive. Brittany, northwest corner of France too. Again, Nantes, Rennes. There are some great connections to Paris, high-speed trains, terrific train networks. A little different climate there than the Southwest, but for those that love, beautiful countryside, the outdoors, that's a great spot to find affordable properties. I mean, there's affordable properties all over. It just depends on, again, how central you want to be located. Do you want to be walking distance to amenities? But like I said, I always start with the train map, and then you can just look on that train map and see all these individual spots, and then you can pull up a website like Le Bon Coin or Se Loger, and just do a search on those individual towns and see what's available for rent or for purchase.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And there's obviously for those who want to buy a property, so maybe some are just looking for like a second home or a pied-à-terre or something like that. But I suppose a lot may also contemplate the idea of moving to France permanently or semi-permanently. And as it's not directly, what you do, but you may have seen that. Is there any relationship, between property ownership and visa applications? Is this necessary, or can they buy before they get a visa?
That's a great question. To purchase property in France, you do not need residency. You don't need citizenship. Technically, you don't even need a passport. But I do assume you would want to go visit it at some point. And so the property purchase process is totally separate from immigration. Now, when you do apply, if you're going to apply for a visa, a long stay visitor visa, you do have to have an accommodation on there, a place you're going to land when you literally land in France. Now, that does not have to be a property you own. That could be a rental. You could even do an Airbnb for a few months while you get your feet. But the property purchase process and the immigration process are, again, separate things. So yes, if somebody wanted to buy a second home, just a vacation home, and maybe in the future turn it into a retirement home, totally doable. And again, you don't have any special visa, residency, anything like that to do it. You just have to go through the process, which our other expert will be able to explain better than me.
No, yeah, but that's great to know. Basically, they don't need a visa to buy a property or to own a property, but vice versa. If you do have a French property, then you can use that address for your visa application, just in case. You mentioned Airbnbs and stuff. So, well, those are technically not visa compliant, but there is a political will to have it a bit more easy in some countries, which the US is part of. So US, Canada, for example, they can indeed use an Airbnb. There's a bit of leeway around that. But for example, audiences from the UK might have it a bit harder, like they won't accept Airbnbs. I think there is also a sense of proximity. Like it might be easier for someone from the UK to find a pied-à-terre in France because they're literally right next door. Whereas it's at the very least a 6-7 hours plane journey to go to the US. So to go shopping for an apartment might be a bit harder. So that's also maybe one of the reasons. But yeah. Okay. So well, actually, speaking about the distance, what would you say? Because I know you organize some of those boot camp, trips in France, but how can someone navigate property viewings or negotiations like from abroad, and especially if they're like a bit far away?
Yeah, you definitely. I mean, personally, I would never recommend someone buy a property sight unseen. I know it happens, and I know people see YouTube videos of people bought this ruin sight unseen and fix it up. That just, I don't know. You're just begging for trouble to me if you do that. So there are tons of websites. I mentioned a couple. Le Bon Coin is one. Seloger, which is SELOGER.com. There's tons of property search websites, and those are good because they'll give you a sense for value in a particular location. So you can see kind of prices based on square meters, number of rooms. You'll get an idea of what the styles are like because, depending on where you are in France, the style of architecture can be, very different. But, once you have an idea, I would always recommend, if possible, to head over and talk to an actual agent on the ground. You can sometimes set these up, before you go, depending on your level of French. I think there's a lot of agents who are certainly looking to help people out, but you just want to.
Or Ben.
Yes, or Ben, our friend Ben, who has a home finder, or Ben, yep, who can do this for you. But yeah, I would recommend you do not buy a property sight unseen, particularly if it's just off of like a web listing. It's just
honestly,
there are too many questions that you can run into.
Oh yeah, definitely agree with that, and that's why, well, jokingly, but yeah, I mentioned Ben because what I like with, and well, I'm not the one paying, so that's why, and I'm not getting a single cent out of that, by the way, guys. But the guys working with guys like Ben, the benefit of that is that you're not working with a real estate agent. You're working with someone who will actually compare agents in a way, and it doesn't care whatever you end up with a big property or not. I mean, it will have a fee depending on the kind of things you're searching, but that's a flat rate, and therefore he's working for you. He's not working for an agency or with a particular real estate realtors. So it is a bit more unbiased. The problem is the real estate agent is going to try to sell you his portfolio, well, a property from his portfolio. So it's a good starting point, but they might have a limited portfolio as well. So
can I jump in? I have
sure.
The sight unseen thing. I totally agree with Tommy. I'm currently chateau shopping with some Californians, and we just visited a chateau in Angers yesterday, and the person selling it is an American who bought it sight unseen and just really didn't know what they were getting themselves into. There was no one checked the building before they got there. It had a magnificent staircase. I think his wife had fallen in love with the staircase, and I could understand that. It was incredible, but just they were just out of their depth, didn't have the knowledge to know how to look after this chateau, didn't know the budget needed to repair it, and really, I felt bad for them because they're probably going to make a big loss. They're going to sell it for, they're going to have to sell it for less. And it's a lesson learned the hard way.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, you're right. Well, again, I mean, this is easy to say, but I cannot stress that enough. If you can afford it, trying to work with professionals who are known in the industry, but not known in an echo chamber if possible, because it's easy to self-validate. but like people who you can see have worked with other people or are part of a bigger network and have been watched by other professionals. So, well, obviously people like Ben, but it's very important. Again, if you can afford it. If you're on a shoestring, it's also very important then to listen to more than one advice, okay? To have even diverging or conflicting information and advice just to make sure you're not, or you won't be falling into the pit traps. Tommy, maybe one last question for you as well, because, well, you're American. So by definition, you well, you can understand the appeal of France from an American's perspective, but so why is France such an attractive country to move to from the US? Is there any particular reason for that apart from, you love the culture or something like that?
Well, it's all about the baguettes. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. Although that is important.
And I
Just to follow up,
I can take bribes in bottles of wine as well, or champagne.
exactly. Just to follow up too on what Ben said about not buying sight unseen. Maybe the most important thing, particularly if you're planning to live there full time, is the property is important, but the area you're in can be just as important. Having a nice, beautiful property that has no amenities or no activities that you're interested in nearby is like you're asking for trouble long term. It's gonna be frustrating. But back to your question, France, and again, I was shocked when I learned this, that more Americans don't understand. France is an absolute no-brainer for retirees who want to retire in Europe. The reason is the tax treaty between France and the US exempts Social Security, retirement accounts, and investing accounts from taxation in France. So that means you can move to France. Say you're on Social Security, you get a Social Security payment every month. You're getting some 401k distributions every month, and you're getting some dividend income from stocks you own in the United States. None of those income sources are taxable in France. They are only taxable in the United States, which has much lower rates, particularly for those types of income. Like I said, it's one of the rare examples of countries where this is the case. Italy is not like that. Italy taxes Social Security, retirement distributions, dividends, all those things at pretty exorbitant rates. So again, if you're thinking, oh well, I wish I could move somewhere where I could get a decent taxation, but the quality of life, the services available in France are incredible. And like I said, it's almost a no-brainer. If somebody asked me, where they should consider in France, I know a lot of people are Portugal super popular because it's very affordable. Spain super popular because it's affordable. Italy super affordable. None of them have the same tax benefits for U.S. citizens as France.
Yeah, and also there is even like a hidden layer of benefit as well, because property income as well is not going to be taxed in France either. It's going to be part of the tax returns, but it's going to be like if you have properties back in the US, for example, actually it would work back in Australia, back in the UK, it's going to remain tax liable in those countries as well. So a lot of the time, retirees moving to France, especially from the US, well, mostly from the US, would not pay any taxes in France, whatever the sources of income. Yeah, definitely. Or maybe we have time for a few live questions. Yeah, I've seen a few questions about property taxes. So, well, especially if we compare that with US taxation, property taxes, it is a complete no-brainer. Maybe Ben, you have something to say about that because you've seen a lot, even with Castle, who's probably the most expensive.
Yeah. So there's probably three main taxes to be aware of. There's the initial, when you make an acquisition in France, and this goes for French people or wherever you're from, it's called Notaire fees. That's a colloquial name, but it's basically the acquisition fees. It's pretty high. It's just gone up 0.5% recently, unfortunately. So it's now between 8 to 8.5%. That's a one-off, one-time tax. A very small percentage of that remains with the notaire for their services, but it's called notaire fees because they collect this tax, and they then pass along nearly all of that money to the French government. So that hurts, the 8.5%. But then the good news is the ongoing annual taxe foncière, it's called, which is basically property tax, is quite low. And that is set by the local commune, the area that you live in, and the value of the home. And that really varies all over the country. But look, most Americans or Australians would look at those annual figures and find them pretty low. Like we bought a chateau recently. It's huge. It's a diamond. It's really beautiful. And the annual tax is about $4,000. So that's
a castle. Yeah.
Yeah, that's for a beautiful castle.
And just so the audience is aware, for example, I have two properties in France. One, the two by the coast, so it's definitely not the cheapest. One is it's my office. I need to count the rooms, but it's a seven main room property, and I'm paying less than $1,000 a year. The other is a 6 bedroom, so 6 main rooms, and we're paying $1,200 because it's by the sea. So
yeah,
and that would
really
not be cheap in France. Okay, there's much cheaper than that, and those are semi-big properties. They're not like 2 or 3 bedrooms. So just so that they can imagine the prices as well.
There would be properties in the US where it's that much per month. So yeah, the annual property tax is really not too bad. And then if you're buying a second home, then you have a third tax. Again, it's not that bad. It's called taxe d'habitation, and it is usually a little bit lower than the taxe foncière. And it's
only for second homeowners, though.
Say again?
It's only for second homeowners.
Correct, only for second homes. If you live in the property as your primary residence, you don't pay the taxe d'habitation. You only pay the taxe foncière.
Exactly. Yes. Okay. So, okay. Patricia is just. I'm addressing some live questions. Patricia is asking, can you repeat the name of agent that is in between purchaser and estate agent? That is Ben. That is Ben, Patricia. Okay. So, Ben, a bit of a more technical question for you. Maybe can you walk us through? I would say almost step by step, but what's the process of purchasing a property as a foreigner in France?
Okay. So I'll try not to go too technical and too detailed because I could talk nearly an hour on this one. But so the key steps, and I know you wanted to know a little bit about the documentation as well. So I really think an important first step is to define your project, know what you're doing with this. Is it a primary residence, secondary? Is it an investment? Is it going to have a commercial activity in there? Really get familiar with exactly what you want to buy, because especially if you're going to do chambre d'hôte or some kind of little commercial activity, this really is going to impact what kind of property you're going to look for. So have a very clear definition of your project. I always, with my clients, and you should do this whether you're going it on your own or not, really the first step is the finance. How am I financing this? Because if you're a cash buyer, great, you can skip this step. But there's no point browsing all of the websites and looking at these beautiful properties, falling in love with these properties if we don't know what the budget is, if we don't know what the maximum borrowing capacity is. So I always start with the finance piece, and then we would get the mortgage broker to do a simulation, get a maximum borrowing capacity, and ideally a pre-approval, because then we look serious when we're dealing with the sales agents and we're starting to make offers. They may not even take an offer from us if they don't think our finance is secure. And then so everything flows from the finance. After that, you can sort of get into more the fun bit, the search, and whether that's just browsing you guys can all find the websites, but there's loads of really good resources for French real estate websites. They don't have the big centralized version that you guys have in the States, so you kind of do need to do them one by one, unfortunately. But obviously so that's your search component. Someone like me, I can help you find off-market properties as well. Then obviously you're going to be scheduling your visits. I don't know if you've tried yet, but you may discover that it is really challenging to get onto these real estate agents. And even we speak fluent French, we're here. It is they don't call you back. It can be hard to actually arrange your visits. And if you're coming from a long way, you're going to want to try and really optimize your schedule and try and see as many as you can while you're here. Then I guess once you get to the point of you might be down to a few favorites, you have to really do a bit of a study on what is this property worth. Like, just because it says online it's 500,000, you like, we have tools and resources that we could go back and say, well, no, I think it's really worth 420 based on previous sales in this area and the average cost per square meter of that area. So I really believe you need to do a study on the true market value of the property, and then that's how you know how you're going to negotiate. Because if you've worked out that the correct market value is, say, 420, maybe your first offer is going to be 390, and be great if we can get it for 405, something like that. Then typically when you're negotiating on your property, it's verbal at first. That's how I usually do it. And then once you get to an agreed price, it goes into the first, I guess, legal document, which is called the offre d'achat, which means offer to purchase. So this is a formal legal document. You put in there the address. This is how much I'm going to offer for this. Make sure I've got lots of tips for you, but basically you want to make sure you request what should be included, what's not included. Make sure you put your conditions in the offer. For example, subject to finance, subject to perhaps a roof inspection, or whatever the case may be. But this is the offre d'achat. And then the real estate agent will hand over that document which you have signed. And when the seller countersigns that document, they become bound to the sale. You, as the buyer, are not locked in at this point, because now kicks in what I call the due diligence process. And so that is a really critical step. And that's the one that often gets missed. And of course, if you're doing sight unseen, who's running your due diligence? So it's maybe not the fun step, but it's this is the moment where we have to really make sure there's no red flags. There wasn't anything perhaps undisclosed, or we want to make sure that we're not buying a lemon or something with hidden and expensive defects. So the due diligence, I won't go into the weeds too much, but I see it running along two tracks. There's the structural due diligence, like checking out the building. And if you're like me and many, like we expats, we usually want the old, beautiful, traditional, stone and like a couple of 100 years old properties, which are what we don't have in Australia and the US. But those are the ones that need to be checked thoroughly, because you do get given the diagnostics. That's another document that is compulsory, provided by the seller, but it's like a bare minimum, and it covers the inside of the home. Like, it will tell you the condition of the electricity. Is there asbestos? What is the plumbing like? The termites, mold, or that kind of thing. But I personally, and with my clients, I usually recommend that we have a building inspector to go in and check out the building, because the roof and the structure is not included in the diagnostics. So I personally think for the extra, up to maybe 1,000 euros, it's better to have to check the building. And because this is the moment where if we do find something that, bad news, like the roof, we thought it was okay, but it needs to be replaced, or actually it has merule, which is a very dangerous kind of mold, you as the buyer can exit the sale at this point, which is why we run the due diligence immediately after getting the offer accepted. So there's usually continuing on the steps. So basically, at the moment, the notaires are very slow, but between offer accepted and then the next milestone is when you sign. It's called the promesse de vente or the compromis de vente, which are two slightly different legal terms, but basically it amounts to, it's the sales document, like the main document that transfers the title into your name. And so you would need to have a really good, I always recommend get an English-speaking notaire to represent you in your acquisition. And they, along with the seller's notaire, will be drafting the promesse de vente. And as I said, that's usually signed anywhere between 2 to 4 weeks after the offer is accepted. So all during that time, you could walk away if anything untoward happens or you discover anything bad about the home. In terms of next critical steps, the very next day after the promesse de vente begins the 10-day cooling off period. And as the name suggests, you can still walk away during that 10 days. Once again, the seller cannot. So there's quite a big chunk of time where you hold the power. You can walk if there's something bad. The seller cannot. They are fully bound to the sale. Then in terms of next steps, basically, once the 10-day cooling off period is over, you would have paid your deposit by then, which is typically 5% of the purchase price. And then once the 10-day cooling off period is over, you are legally bound to go ahead with the purchase. The only way that you could not go ahead with buying it without penalties is if you had a condition in there. I hope I'm not being too technical, but if you made your offer, for example, subject to finance and the finance is not approved, that's not your fault. And so you can show the refusal letters from the bank saying we tried to get a loan, couldn't get it. And then so you are not obliged to go ahead with the purchase. Otherwise, if you just say, oh, I'm sorry, I've changed my mind, there are penalties for that. So we don't want that to happen. In terms of timeline, it's typically, if there is a bank loan involved, after you sign the promesse de vente, it is about 8 weeks until the bank will approve the loan. And then there's an additional 1 more month after that where you can sign the final closing documents, and that document is called the acte de vente. And that is when you can collect the keys. So when there's a bank loan involved, you're looking at a total of 3 months after the promesse. And when there's no bank loan involved, you can probably save about 3 to 4 weeks off of that. So 2 and a bit months without a bank loan. And then just in terms of the legal requirements, as Tommy said, yeah, anyone can buy a property in France, pretty much. I think almost all nationalities, there's no limitations on that. You do not need to be a resident. And then just the documents you need to supply when you are going ahead with a purchase is what you would expect. It's things like they want to see your passports, your ID. If you're married, they want to see your marriage certificate. And then there's a few other documents that the Notaire will send you about like the origin of the funds, because they have to, when a lot of money is coming in from another country, they need to make sure that, there's no money laundering, that kind of thing. So you have to show where did the funds come from, whether it was from selling a home in the US or just savings or whatever the case may be. But those are the basic steps.
Okay, well, thank you for that. I was answering a lot of questions in the Q&A as well to compile as much as I could, just because I was seeing that, and this is a question I'm hearing often. Maybe also Tommy has come across that. Chael is asking, sorry if I pronounced that wrong, any concerns that our current administration will cause changes to the taxation exemption? So she's from the US, I suppose. I'm talking with a lot of US expats on our channel, FAB Expat on YouTube. I interview a lot of US expats who have moved to France. And if anything, everyone, Nani in the background, who is answering you as well. And sorry, I forgot to introduce her again. Sorry. Thank you, Nani, for being there. So everyone tells me that if anything, the French are actually more empathetic towards Americans now. So, and the French government is showing again and again that they're trying to make it easier, not harder, for Americans to move to France. So although this is just my opinion, but I don't think it's going to get worse immigration-wise. If anything, again, I think it's going to be better rather than worse. So short answer is you're welcome. You can come around. France is happy to have you guys. Chara is asking a question for you, Ben. She says she will be in the Dordogne Massif Central area in June and would like to view some properties. How can we get in contact with Ben or another agent that can help us start this process?
Okay, so I think Nani is going to send out both mine and Tommy's details to everyone. So you're welcome to contact me on email. So I guess what I would say to that is typically it's good if we can have at least 3 to 4 weeks of preparation time. So basically, if I have clients coming from a long way, it's, often I have people coming from California, Australia. I don't want them wasting any time when they're here. So I would put together 3 to 4, sometimes 2 really intense days of visits where I would line them up, optimize the schedule, and make sure that, the drive time is the minimum. It's really, really a fine art trying to visit a lot of properties in a short time, and especially trying to get French real estate agents to meet you on the day and time that you want is much harder than you would think. So all that to say, it does take preparation time to put together a very efficient and productive schedule. So what are we now? Like 3rd week of May. Yeah, I mean, it can be done, but it's the kind of thing where, if, like with any client that I would work with, we would need to have a kickoff meeting. You would tell me your search criteria, your project, the location, all of that kind of stuff. My team and I would put together a really good selection of properties for you that you can look at. We have like a shared portal kind of thing. There's columns there that you as the client could, you go in and you say, love this one, like it, it's okay, don't like. And we start doing the triage, like which, and we start learning your architectural like preferences, things like that. Then once we've got it down to say, big important step is we would call the real estate agent for all the properties that you like and make sure that it really does meet your criteria, because just what's in the listing is usually the best bit. So it's our job to call the real estate agent and find out, oh, well, is there a factory nearby? Is it noisy? Is it this? Is it that? Is there a lot of renovations that they haven't mentioned? So I would like to always, if a property could have been ruled out through a phone call, I don't want us visiting that, because that means we didn't do our homework and we just wasted 2 hours of your time, my time, the agent, visiting a property that if we had have done our homework, we could have told you that, the roof needs to be replaced. So there's a lot of, we don't just do visits willy-nilly here. Like in Australia, on a Saturday morning, you can just whiz around and visit as many houses as you want and no one really blinks. It's just very normal to pop in and do visits. In France, it's a really big deal. They vet you, the client. We're vetting them, the property, and visits really happen only for properties that you genuinely like and that have a good chance that you might actually want to buy it. So we do a lot of homework, a lot of preparation to make sure that we're only visiting things that really work for you, and then put together a good schedule. And then usually in about 3 days, which is what I'm doing right now from while I'm in this Airbnb, I've got clients here. At the end, they've seen a really good selection of properties, and then then they're making a decision with the full amount of information that they possibly could have. And that's how I would recommend that you do it for June.
Okay, great. Well, like you were saying, also like kind of the short answer would be, we will send you guys an email, a follow-up email, so they can reach out, and they should reach out directly. We're going to try to send this email tomorrow, as soon as we can, French time. Might be for you, Tommy, or may also be for you, Ben, but Chris is asking, in case any of you is watching the prices, how have property prices changed? He's mentioning Charente over the past few years, but maybe in general. Tommy, what have you seen from your gems?
Things have definitely gone up over the past couple of years, really since the pandemic. I think a lot of people started looking for things that an escape that maybe they had been thinking about for later in life. Things have definitely gone up. Again, it all depends on the individual location, real estate's location. But in general, they have gone up somewhat. Certain areas of France, actually, prices have gone down, but a lot of times that's not the most popular areas for retirees.
And also, I think for American audience, it is somewhat important to specify that the French market is very peculiar in that regard. Like, for example, 2008 or other crashes, the French property market didn't crash. I mean, worst case scenario was stable, kind of done-ish ill, but it's pretty stable, this market, isn't it?
Yeah, and I was going to say, for Americans who we think about sometimes about real estate as like flipping, like you're going to buy a property, do some work to it, and then the next year it's going to be worth 20, 30% more. That is very rare in France, or at least you shouldn't come into with an expectation like that. I'm not saying you can't make money that way, but if you're thinking about renting things out like Airbnb, it's more about the cash flow than it is the actual real estate value. Again, it will probably go up, but it's not like the United States.
I agree. I think I've flipped a lot of houses in Australia. I wouldn't personally recommend it here. I think the property prices are too stable for that. Like, it's not a dynamic market typically. Paris behaves like a US or like Anglo-Saxon market. It can really perform and go up quite quickly sometimes, and so can the Southeast, the Provence, Côte d'Azur. But the majority of the country is quite flat and quite stable. Like, flat, not in a bad way, but like, don't expect a lot of capital growth. I agree. It's probably more of a lifestyle decision, not a money-making decision. And things do tend to, the cost per square meter is really the number one like rule of thumb here on how much is something worth. And it really has a ceiling, like, because you could, like, the size of the property, there will be a little variation in an unrenovated one and one that's been renovated, but there's not enough upside, like, because the ceiling just kicks in on, like, people just won't go over a certain cost per square meter for a certain area, however nice you can really make the home. So I would say, flipping and expecting strong capital growth is probably unrealistic, but it's stable, and you know, there can be some properties that linger on the market here, and there can be some really good buying opportunities in a market like this.
Can I follow up on that, Fab?
Yeah, definitely.
I will agree with Ben, and I'll also go back to his comments about the due diligence. It's easy for Americans to look at sometimes these property websites, and you see what something is being offered for, and you immediately think, oh my gosh, how is that possible? That does not mean it's a good value relative to the area or the other things around it. So again, obviously don't buy sight unseen, but also if you see something and you look at it online, the pictures, and you think, that's incredible, like that would cost, you know, twice as much in the United States. You still don't want to leave money on the table. That still doesn't mean it's a great deal for that specific town or department or area of France. That's why, again, you have to do that due diligence, check comps. I think somebody asked in the questions, there is a website. I don't have it handy, but I can share it afterwards. Fab or Ben might know, but there is a website, a public website that the French government posts the real estate transactions, I think, for the past 5 years. So you can actually go into, and you can actually zoom down to like individual neighborhoods and things. If you wanted to, again, look online, you see a property and then go to this website and say, well, this property is 250,000 euros, but all these other ones that sold in the same like neighborhood recently all sold for, you know, 170,000 euros. So maybe this is somebody just trying to inflate for a foreign buyer. There is a website at least to look that stuff up.
Actually, it makes me think of something that's very, very often pops up in my consultations. It's very often overlooked, an issue, which is the driving licenses and driving in France, because it does influence, especially when coming from the US. There's only 18 states who have an agreement with France, which means that so actually, I've made an infographics about that on, fabexpat.com on the blog section, and you can have a look at that. So it is an important thing to factor in, because, well, if you're going to live in a very busy city, very big, maybe you don't want to drive or to be driving, it's completely fine. You don't care about that this much. But if you're going to go to the countryside or somewhat of the countryside, it's highly likely that you're going to need a vehicle. And if you're going to need a vehicle, you're going to need the legal ability to drive there. And if you're from a state like, I don't know, Georgia, California, all of those states who do not have the driver license exchange agreement, it means you will either have to go through the French test again, like as if you're a teenager, or you may want to consider changing states before moving to France in the first place, and reach out to the DMV to get a license that's exchangeable. So this is an important decision to consider before moving or before buying in a particular place or before considering moving in that particular place. Because if you move in a place that you love, but you happen to not be able to drive, it's going to make your life much harder. And so, although French transportation is nice, but on a daily basis to grocery runs and stuff like this. So,
By the way, Fab, that French train map, I think someone asked a question about that.
oh yeah,
I put a link in at least our chat, the panelist chat. For some reason, I'm not sure if it went through to
okay,
everyone.
yeah,
But
I'll share
if
it.
you
on
can just copy and paste that
Yes.
to the
We'll do
again,
right
it's a publicly available. It's like a PDF that you download, and then when it opens up, you can zoom in and see all the train stuff.
Yeah, just
And that government website, I use that one. I can send it to you, Fabien, and then it can be sent out to everyone.
Brilliant. Okay, we'll try to include that as well. Good stuff.
Thanks, Ben.
So it says really a live session, you say. And we're pushing our multitasking task to skills to the limit. So that's the problem of having three males panelists. Apparently we're very bad at multitasking. Well, back to you, Ben. Would you have important or like the most important considerations when valuating a property? Well, for renovations, I know we talked about that before often, and like addressing structural, like you mentioned, structural soundness and potential issues, but things that should really factor in or consider, renovation wise when buying a property.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's so much to think about with renovating. And I guess it also depends on at what point in the process. Like, I think if you're looking at a house, you don't own it yet, but you know it needs to be renovated, there's sort of one way of looking at that. And then other ways of approaching a renovation of a house that you already own. I would say, when you're looking at a property that you don't own yet, I always love when I make property acquisitions for myself or for clients, I'm like, where can I add some value here? And it can sometimes just be little things like the configuration is not good. I can probably make an extra bedroom out of this. I can probably, the washing machine's in the kitchen. I really hate that. And maybe I can do a nice little separate laundry, like small little value adds, I think is always good to look for when you're, looking for your acquisition. Personal anecdote, a really cool project that I'm trying to do is we bought a top floor apartment in Paris, and the buildings next door are both 2 stories higher. And so my project which would be so cool if we could get it done, is to add a lot of value, is create 2 more floors. And so when you think about like the cost per square meter of floor space in Paris is, say, where we bought this apartment is 12,000 per square meter, and the cost to renovate is, say, 1,000 or 1,500. It's a no-brainer there of like adding on floor space is instantly you're making money. And I think I would say another important factor when you're thinking about do I pour money into this property, if you are considering renovating in a place where the cost to purchase is really low, like it can be, we can buy properties in France where the cost per square meter is, say, 1,000 to buy property. The cost to renovate in most places is at least 1,000 per square meter. So if you're putting money into a renovation where the cost to renovate is higher than just the cost to buy, you're actually losing money doing that. So you need to really fundamentally think, why would I buy this property that costs this much, and then I'm going to have to spend another 1,000 per square meter? I will never be able to get my money back. So I think putting too much money into renovations in an area where the cost per square meter, you just can't get your money back, avoid that. That would be that's just a good fundamental tip. When I've got clients considering buying properties that they know need to be renovated because that's what they want, like they want to do a renovation project, I always try to, and this is not easy, but before you make the purchase, I always like to go back for a second visit, bring a builder with me or like a contractor or someone, and see if we can at least get some sort of estimate from the builder before we go ahead and make the acquisition. Because I might look at this apartment and say, okay, the kitchen needs 30,000, the bathroom needs 10, and this, and then, but suddenly like the builder's gone in there and discovered that the whole thing needs to be rewired, and I didn't factor in 40,000 of electrics. So in terms of your process, I really believe if you can try and get builders in there 1 or 2 quotes before you commit to the purchase, in terms of your process, I think that's a really wise step. And then I think as I mentioned, like offline, I think it's really my overall comments on renovating is that I love renovating. It's really fun. And as we all know, like even in our home countries, renovating is hard. Some people love it and some really hate it. But just be realistic about that there are more layers of complication by doing it in another language and at another country that has different rules, and B, it's natural that you don't have the network and the referrals and the address book that you might have in your home country. So I think you want to, I'm not saying don't renovate, but I'm saying you want to make sure you have an answer for those things. So I don't have a network. Well, I need to plug into someone who does, or I at least need to talk to some neighbors who have renovated, and so I'm engaging a builder who they've vouched for. Like, don't just be Googling an electrician or a plumber and hoping that it goes well. Like, we want to make sure that we're dealing with people that have been vetted.
And this is the joke. Well, it's not a joke, but it's a joke I like to make. There is even a French specific, sorry for you guys, but there's even a French specific saying. So it relates to that. Like, we have a saying that says, "Tu me prends pour un Américain?" Like, do you think I'm an American? When we think something is too expensive. And it's not actually, it is not to insult Americans. It is to say the French people, the French natives, they think Americans are so wealthy that they can afford crazily inflated prices or quotes. So obviously in industries such as car dealerships, builders, those which are unfortunately infamous for having a lot of, I wouldn't say untrustworthy, but, people in those industries tend to try to get the most off of their quotes or your hard-earned dollars. So it's yet another reason for me to be working with professionals, because you may not even realize this, but you're actually saving money by paying people to work with you, because they'll be getting you the French price, the normal price, not the American price, for example. Because as you can imagine, if this is a proper saying that we all say, all the French native would know that saying. So, if they see a literal American coming to the doorstep as a builder, they'd be like, oh, well, this is going to make my day. Whereas if you work with a professional that knows the pricing, he'll negotiate for you. And I'm not saying that so that you all work with Ben or, again, I'm not commissioned, but I know, I've been around I'm French, so I know those guys work, and I'm certain it's going to be the same in Canada, in the US, in any countries. Okay. If they know they could charge more, they will try to do that. And also there is another layer to that, which is planning permits, something we call the PLUI, planning permits, building permits. You need to know what you're doing requires some of those permits, or obviously you may be up to a nasty surprise. And again, it's just another layer. Everything is completely doable. Don't get me wrong. We're definitely not playing the fear-mongering card, but it's going to make your life so much easier to have someone have your back. That's it. So again, if you can afford it, definitely, I would strongly say, I am French, and I'm using the services of third parties, of subcontractors, to do my planning permits and stuff, because this is tedious. Honestly, this is completely doable. I've done plenty myself, but when I
do as well. I don't do any of my own permits or anything, because you can't be a professional in everything, and so you have to have your expertise in what you do, and then you want to obviously connect to people who that is their expertise. And I think half of you asking me about just guidelines on renovations, I think part of it is knowing, well, who's running this, what team do I need to make this renovation possible? Is it a really tiny renovation and I'll just manage myself, the the person who's doing the kitchen, and I just need them and one plumber? I could probably handle that on my own. Maybe if it's like a medium-sized project, I think I probably need like an interior designer they will then probably bring in their own trades to do the project, and they'll communicate with them in French. They'll like help me draw up my plans, that kind of thing. Or, if it's a really involved kind of project, well, maybe you're going to need a full architect and team. So I think half of the question is just around like who's running this project, what level of expertise do I need to make sure that this renovation goes well, and then that person will be in charge of all the forms that you're mentioning, which I don't like doing them either.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, who likes paperwork? I mean,
Yeah.
So actually, a very good question. So two questions in a row, and we're gonna try to wrap it up because we're getting over time. But Stephen is asking, do already established Gîtes or Airbnb properties come up for purchase often?
Yeah.
Tommy, maybe you've seen as well?
Yeah. And that is, I won't say, I mean, it's not as common as obviously just individual homes, but fairly frequently. And I guess maybe it's just a French thing, but there seem to be a lot more homes that have like a small gîte or a small like secondary property that's been used as a rental. That's very common. Yeah. And that's something in a lot of the property search websites you can actually search for by that.
Yeah, I see them fairly often too. Yeah.
Yeah, and by the way, I've seen these questions pops up a couple times in the chat. So if you're buying a property that comes with a rental income, or if you have other properties that generate rental income, you can use that sources of income for your visa. However, if you're buying a property that will generate income, you can not use that for the visa yet. For the visa purposes, they only consider income you're already making or doing, okay? Not prospective income, unless you apply for some sort of a business visa, and therefore they will ask for projections and stuff like this, but this is a different story. And you do not need a business type of visa to run rentals and gîtes in France, unless it exceeds 23,000 euros per annum, which is fairly generous. It's going to be seen as non-professional. Chris is asking, what is the best, so a question for you, Ben, what is the best way to find a building inspector for the more in-depth report on a property? Because you've mentioned this, there is an inspection that's mandatory as part of the buying process, but it's kind of a lightweight inspection. So
yeah, so the compulsory is the diagnostics, and the seller must provide that. And yes, it is light on, but it's useful. But it doesn't cover the structure. It just covers the inside. And so, yes, I always recommend getting a building inspector, as I mentioned. Look, how do I get them? I know them through architects. I just know them through my experience of making acquisitions. And I've only got a handful of them, honestly, who I trust. And they do jobs miles away from me, and they charge a small amount for transportation. But then I'd rather I've only got 2 or 3 who I really recommend, and they cover the whole country, because again, it's not something, I don't want to just Google a building inspector or just be relying on something that I haven't had a correct referral. So for me, it's just there's a few of them, and I know they're good and trustworthy, and that's all you need.
Oh, by the way, I've seen the question in the chat as well. So Ben, where can you work? Are you limited to a specific zone, or can you work nationwide, let's say?
No, we cover the whole of France. I mean, it's wherever the client wants. Part of what we do is some people say, I want to buy a house in France, they don't know where. And so, of course, we can give guidance on where might suit them based on a whole lot of questions that we ask. But then, of course, some people already know where they want to buy, and that's where we would work. It tends to be, I have a lot of clients in Provence, where I live, a lot of clients in the Southwest, and then Normandy, Val de Loire for chateaus and things like that. And then, of course, Paris as well. Like, people want a little pied-à-terre in Paris. But, you know, if you want something in the east or the north, it's rare. I don't get many inquiries for those areas. but there's some nice parts like Les Vosges. There's some beautiful parts outside of those key areas, but it's really up to wherever you want.
An interesting question from Michelle. Like, how do you decide whenever you need an interior architect, a designer, or an architect? What scope of work do each of them do? If I'm correct, well, under a certain size or a certain project, you do have a choice. But like, for example, if it's bigger than a certain surface, you'd need to get an architect involved. Isn't that right?
Over 150 square meters, no matter what, it must be an architect. If it's under 150 square meters, an interior architect can potentially handle it on their own, depending on what the work is. Once you start knocking out walls, no, you'll probably need either an architect or what we call bureau d'études, which is like engineer. Like there's a service that you can tap into where they will come in and study. Okay, well, we're knocking out a load-bearing wall. You're going to need this I-beam, or you're going to need that kind. They will tell you what you need. An interior designer could engage them for that part of the project and then handle everything else, as long as the area is under 150 square meters. So, for example, Paris apartment, often they are smaller than 150. We're not interfering with anything on the outside. Usually, an interior architect could handle that. But for a house in the countryside that's bigger than 150, or knocking out walls, things like that, you probably need to get a full architect.
Okay, fantastic. Well, we've answered almost 150 questions in the background, and you've answered a lot of questions live. So we're getting towards the end of this session. Tommy, Ben, maybe a final word?
You go first.
Well, what would you want to leave the audience with, if they remember anything?
Yes. Well, number one, thank you for hosting this, Fab. It's always great to catch up with you, and also nice meeting Ben. I always love meeting professionals who are passionate about France and helping people get there successfully. I'll just say again, there's a lot of terrific opportunities in France. From an American perspective, again, you can find some incredible values in, again, great places to live. Don't think, the cheap houses are all going to be, on a mountaintop out in the middle of nowhere. There are great opportunities, but as we've alluded to, you need to work with professionals so that you're not, spinning your wheels, and you need to do a considerable amount of due diligence, including an on-the-ground visit if possible. Again, to not only look at the property,
can come with you in one of your
the area.
retreats.
Exactly. Next year we're planning some potential retreats in France. So, I'll have more information on my newsletter if people want to join me there.
Ben?
Look, I just, I think go for it. Life is short. France is a great country to live in. It's not all champagne and caviar. That's hard.
Oh, we have wine sometimes.
Yeah. But yeah, there's ups and downs in moving countries. We've got young kids, and it's a great way of meeting all of their friends' parents are really welcoming to us as expats, and but moving countries, you do miss home. So think about it really carefully. But I fully vouch for coming to live in France. I love the culture here, the food, the architecture. And also, I would also consider it as just living in Europe, because yes, you have to choose one country and you live there. But Europe, it's completely different than Australia and US. I mean, we can drive to Italy in 2 hours from where we are. Spain, I think it's only 4.5. So it's a really nice change of lifestyle. And I highly recommend it.
And at the minute, at least, France is one of the countries where it's the easiest to get a visa, and the visa is the most flexible as well. And especially for Americans, because there's also a lot of tax incentives. And for all of the other countries, France has pretty much a tax treaty that prevents dual taxation. So it is really a great country. It's very expat welcoming as well.
Yeah. So the healthcare and the transport, as you mentioned, is so good. I mean, I love the train travel here, and the schools, the healthcare. I highly recommend it.
Thank you both, Ben, Tommy. Thank you for being here this evening. Tommy, this afternoon for you in the US. Thank you both for being there. Thank you, all the audience. Thank you for joining so many of you. Always appreciate all the love. See you soon, everyone. And we're going to send the follow-up email as soon as we Frenchly can. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Au revoir. Bye.
Au revoir.